The first time my parents told me I was adopted, I was 7 years old. We were sitting at the dinner table, a weathered oak piece that had been in our Pennsylvania home since before I was born. My father, Richard, was cutting into his overcooked steak when I complained about having to eat Brussels sprouts. "Well, Emma, your real parents probably would have let you skip vegetables," he said, with that half smile that never reached his eyes. "Too bad they didn't want you." My mother, Diane, didn't even look up from her plate. She just reached for her wine glass, took a sip, and said, "Richard, not at dinner." I remember staring at my plate, the steam from the Brussels sprouts fogging up as my eyes welled with tears. I didn't understand what adopted meant exactly, but I understood "didn't want you." Those 3 words hung in the air like the cigarette smoke that constantly filled our house. That was 20 years ago. I'm 27 now, living in Philadelphia, working as a data analyst at a healthcare company, and I've heard variations of that adoption story more times than I can count. It became their favorite weapon whenever I disappointed them, which seemed to be most of the time. "Your real mother was probably a druggie who couldn't handle responsibility either," my mom would say when I missed curfew as a teenager. "No wonder your birth parents gave you up." "Couldn't deal with your attitude," my dad would mutter when I questioned him. The thing is, there were no adoption papers, no birth certificate naming someone else as my mother, no evidence whatsoever that I wasn't biologically theirs, just their cruel comments, designed to make me feel unwanted, unworthy of love. I spent my childhood searching for physical similarities between us. I have my mother's slim build and my father's blue eyes, or so I thought. But every time I'd point this out, they'd say, "Just a coincidence," or "That's how we picked you." Wanted one that could pass as ours. The summer after I graduated college, I was helping my mother clean the attic when I found a small box of my baby photos. There was one of her in a hospital bed, holding me, with my father standing beside them. She looked exhausted but was smiling. He had his hand on her shoulder, beaming with pride. "If I was adopted, why do you have pictures of me as a newborn with you in the hospital?" I asked, showing her the photo. She snatched it from my hand. "We picked you up from the hospital. Your birth mother didn't even want to see you after you were born. Just handed you over to social services." That night, I searched online for information about adoption in Pennsylvania in the 90s. I learned that closed adoptions were becoming less common by then. There would have been paperwork, records, something. When I confronted my parents with this information, my father laughed. "You really think we'd keep that paperwork around for you to find? We burned it all years ago." I moved out a week later. For years, I tried to put it all behind me. I limited contact with my parents to obligatory holiday calls and occasional emails. I focused on building my own life, my own identity separate from the rejection they'd ingrained in me. I went to therapy, where my counselor suggested that my parents' claims about my adoption might be a form of emotional abuse. "But why would they lie about something like that?" I asked her. "Some parents use tactics like this to maintain control," she explained. "If you believe you were unwanted by your real parents, you might try harder to please the parents you have." It made sense, but I needed to know for sure. That's when I decided to get a DNA test. I ordered one of those mail-in kits that everyone was using to discover their ancestry. I followed the instructions, spit in the tube, and sent it off. 6 weeks later, I got an email saying my results were ready. I sat in my apartment, rain pattering against the windows as I logged into the website. My hands were shaking. Part of me hoped the test would show I was adopted. At least then my parents wouldn't have been lying all these years. Just cruel. But another part of me suspected the truth was even more twisted. The screen loaded. 49% British Isles, 27% Germanic Europe, 14% Scandinavian, 10% Eastern European, and various traces of other regions. Interesting, but not what I was looking for. I clicked on the DNA Relatives tab. No close matches yet. The system was still processing. I would have to wait. 3 days later, I got another email. "New close relative match." The subject line made my heart race. I clicked through immediately. There he was, Richard Harper, my father. 49.7% shared DNA. Parent-child relationship. I stared at the screen for what felt like hours. All those years of psychological torture, of making me feel unwanted and unloved, based on a lie. I wasn't adopted. I was their biological daughter. And now I had proof. April in Philadelphia brings unpredictable weather. One day warm sunshine, the next bitter rain. It was during one of those rainy days that I decided to confront my father with the DNA results. My mother had been visiting her sister in Virginia, so I knew he'd be alone. Perfect timing for the conversation I'd been rehearsing for weeks. I drove the 2 hours to my childhood home in Allentown, a middle-class neighborhood where most houses looked the same. Colonial-style homes with neatly trimmed lawns and American flags fluttering from porches. Our house was the one with the peeling blue paint and overgrown hedges. My father never believed in wasting money on home maintenance. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed his ancient Buick parked crookedly, one tire on the lawn. Typical. He'd probably been drinking since noon, his weekend ritual since retiring from the steel mill 3 years ago. I sat in my car for a few minutes, gathering courage. The manila envelope with the printed DNA results felt heavy in my hands. I rehearsed what I would say one more time, took a deep breath, and walked to the front door. I didn't knock. I still had my key, though I rarely used it. The house smelled the same: cigarettes, stale coffee, and the faint scent of the pine-scented cleaner my mother insisted on using despite my childhood asthma. "Dad!" I called out, my voice echoing through the entryway. "In here," he grunted from the living room. He was in his recliner, watching a baseball game, a half-empty bottle of whiskey on the side table. He didn't look up when I entered the room. "Didn't know you were coming by," he said, eyes still fixed on the TV. "I need to talk to you about something important." I remained standing, shifting my weight from one foot to the other. He sighed, muted the TV, and finally looked at me. "What? You need money again?" "I've never asked you for money," I said, my resolve already weakening. This was how it always went. He would immediately put me on the defensive. "Well, what is it then?" He took a swig straight from the bottle. I opened the envelope and pulled out the papers. I did a DNA test. Something flickered across his face. Concern, maybe fear, but it disappeared quickly. One of those ancestry things? Waste of money? It showed something interesting. I stepped closer, holding out the results. "You're on here, as my biological father." He snorted. "Those tests are bullshit. They just make that stuff up to sell more kits." "No, they don't. You actually took one too, remember? Christmas 2 years ago. Mom got them for everyone." His face darkened. "So what?" "So, I'm not adopted." "I never was. You and Mom are my biological parents." He looked away, jaw clenched. "What's your point?" "My point?" My voice rose despite my determination to stay calm. "My entire life, you both told me I was unwanted, that my real parents gave me away. Do you have any idea what that did to me?" He stood up suddenly, towering over me just like he did when I was a child. "You turned out fine, didn't you? Got your fancy job, your apartment in the city. What are you complaining about?" "I'm not complaining. I'm asking why you lied to me for 20 years about something so fundamental to my identity." He walked to the window, his back to me. Outside, the rain had started coming down harder, drumming against the roof. "It was your mother's idea," he finally said. "What?" "After you were born. You cried all the time, day and night. Diane couldn't handle it. She started saying she wished we'd never had you." He turned to face me. "I told her she couldn't say that kind of thing to a kid. That's when she came up with the adoption story. Said if you thought you were already unwanted by your real parents, it wouldn't hurt as much when we got frustrated with you." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. "And you went along with it?" He shrugged. "It worked, didn't it? You were always trying to prove yourself, always behaving, until you became a teenager anyway. That's monstrous," I whispered. "Oh, don't be so dramatic." He waved dismissively. Parents say all kinds of things to get their kids to behave. We fed you, clothed you, put a roof over your head. What more did you want? Basic human decency? Love? The truth? My voice cracked. He sat back down heavily in his recliner. Look, what's done is done. You know the truth now. So what? What do you want from me? That was the question, wasn't it? What did I want? An apology? He wasn't capable of that. Understanding? He'd never understand the damage they'd done. I want you to tell Mom I know, I said finally. And I want you both to get help. Talk to someone about why you thought it was okay to emotionally torture your child for 2 decades. He laughed, an ugly sound. That's not going to happen. Then I don't think I can have you in my life anymore, I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice was. Either of you. Fine by me. He unmuted the TV, effectively dismissing me. I stood there for a moment longer, waiting for something. A flicker of regret. A moment of connection. Nothing came. As I walked out of that house, I realized I was crying. Not for the loss of my relationship with my parents, that had been broken long ago, but for the little girl who spent her whole life believing she was fundamentally unwanted. She deserved better. I called my therapist from the car, rain beating against the windshield, mixing with my tears until I could barely see. She agreed to see me for an emergency session that evening. You did the right thing, Emma, she told me after I recounted what had happened. Confronting him was brave. Then why do I feel so empty? Because you're grieving, not just the relationship you had with your parents, but the one you never got to have, the one you deserved. I nodded, wiping away tears. What will you do now? She asked. I thought about it for a moment. I need to talk to my mother. And then, I don't know. Start over, I guess. My mother called 3 days after my confrontation with my father. I was at work, analyzing patient outcome data, when her name flashed on my phone screen. I stepped into the stairwell to take the call. Your father told me what happened, she said without preamble. Her voice was tight, controlled, just like always. And? I leaned against the concrete wall, preparing myself for more excuses, more gaslighting. And I think we should talk. In person. I closed my eyes, feeling a headache forming at my temples. I don't know if that's a good idea right now. Please, Emma. There was something in her voice I'd rarely heard before. Vulnerability. I need to explain some things. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her the following Saturday at a cafe halfway between our homes. Neutral territory. The cafe was busy when I arrived, filled with weekend brunch goers and the smell of coffee. My mother was already there, sitting at a corner table, her posture perfect, as always. At 57, Diane Harper still maintained the rigid composure of the bank manager she'd been before retirement. Her blonde hair, now streaked with gray, was pulled back in a neat bun. You look well, she said as I sat down across from her. Thanks. I didn't return the compliment. I ordered a black coffee when the server came by, while my mother asked for chamomile tea. Your father is very upset, she began once we were alone again. I let out a short, bitter laugh. He's upset? That's rich. Emma, please. This isn't easy for me either. I can imagine. It must be difficult having your decades-long psychological abuse exposed. The words came out sharper than I intended, but I didn't regret them. She flinched. Is that what you think it was? Abuse? What would you call telling your child they were unwanted, abandoned, not really yours, when none of it was true? She looked down at her hands, perfectly manicured nails tapping against the ceramic mug. I know it sounds terrible when you put it that way. Because it is terrible, Mom. It is exactly that terrible. The server brought our drinks. We sat in uncomfortable silence until she left. I had severe postpartum depression after you were born, my mother finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. It wasn't recognized the way it is now. The doctor gave me some pills and told me to buck up. Your father was working 12-hour shifts. I was alone with you all day, every day, and I couldn't cope. I'd never heard this before. Go on. One night, when you were about 3 months old, you wouldn't stop crying. I hadn't slept more than 2 hours at a stretch since you were born. I was holding you, walking around the living room, begging you to stop, and I had this horrible thought. She paused, took a shaky breath. I thought about putting you down and walking away, just leaving the house and never coming back. I felt a chill run through me. I didn't do it, she continued quickly. I called your grandmother instead. She came over, took you for the night. But those feelings, that resentment, it didn't go away. I loved you, but I also felt trapped by you. It was confusing and shameful. That still doesn't explain the adoption lie, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The first time I told you that you were adopted, it just came out. You were throwing a tantrum about something. I don't even remember what, and I snapped. I said, "No wonder your real mother gave you up." As soon as I said it, I saw how it affected you. You got quiet, stopped crying, started trying to please me. She looked away. It worked so well that I told your father about it. He thought it was a good tool to keep you in line. A tool, I repeated flatly. I was a child, not a dog you were training. I know that now, she said. But back then, I was just trying to survive each day. The lie became our shorthand for behave or else. And then it was too late to take it back. It's never too late to tell your child the truth. She nodded slowly. You're right. But the longer it went on, the harder it became to admit what we'd done. And then it just became normal. I took a sip of my coffee, now lukewarm. Did you ever think about what it was doing to me? How it shaped my entire view of myself? Not enough, she admitted. I think we both became desensitized to it. And when you started pulling away as a teenager, becoming more independent, it just reinforced our belief that you didn't really need us anyway. I pulled away because you made me feel unwanted in my own home, I said, feeling tears threatening. I spent my entire life thinking there was something fundamentally wrong with me, something that made my own biological parents reject me. Do you have any idea what that does to a person? A tear slipped down her cheek. I'm so sorry, Emma. I know those words aren't enough, but I am truly sorry. I wanted to stay angry. Anger was safer than the hurt, the grief that lay beneath it. But seeing my mother cry, something she'd rarely done in front of me, cracked something open inside me. I don't know if I can forgive you, I said honestly. Either of you. I understand. She reached across the table hesitantly, not quite touching my hand. But I want you to know that you were wanted. You are wanted. The problem was never you. It was us. We failed you as parents. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something I'd missed before. Regret. Deep, genuine regret. Dad doesn't see it that way, I said. Your father has never been good at admitting when he's wrong. But I think, in his way, he knows what we did was terrible. His way isn't good enough for me anymore. She nodded. I understand if you need to keep your distance from us. But I hope someday you might be willing to try again, on new terms. I didn't know what to say to that. Part of me wanted to walk away and never look back. But another part, the part that still longed for the parents I deserved, wanted to believe change was possible. I need time, I finally said. Take all the time you need. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small, worn photograph. It was the one I'd found in the attic years ago. Her in the hospital bed holding newborn me. I want you to have this, proof that you came from us, that you've always been ours. I took the photo, my fingers tracing the edge of the faded print. Thank you. As we left the cafe, she hugged me. A tentative, awkward embrace that nonetheless felt more genuine than any physical affection she'd shown me in years. I'm going to get help, she said as we parted. Real help this time. I nodded, not making any promises, and walked to my car. The photo felt heavy in my pocket, a small piece of truth finally in my possession. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the conversation with my mother, examining it from every angle. Was she genuinely remorseful or just sorry she got caught in the lie? Could she really change after all these years? Could my father? I pulled out the hospital photo and studied it under the lamp on my nightstand. My mother looked younger, softer somehow. There was genuine joy in her face as she held me. What had happened to that woman? When had the joy of motherhood turned to resentment? The next day, my friend Leah came over with takeout and wine. I'd told her everything about the DNA test and the confrontations with my parents. "So, how do you feel after talking to your mom?" she asked, pouring us each a glass of Merlot. "Confused," I admitted. Part of me wants to believe she's genuinely sorry, that she wants to make amends. But another part keeps hearing that voice in my head saying, "Your real parents didn't want you either." That's understandable. Those messages get ingrained deep, Leah said. She'd been through her own family trauma, an alcoholic father who disappeared when she was 12. But you know what I think? I think you're allowed to be hopeful and skeptical at the same time. I took a long sip of wine. What do you mean? You can hope that she's changed, that she's genuinely sorry, while still protecting yourself. Trust has to be earned back. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. My therapist said something similar. She suggested setting boundaries while still leaving the door open for healing. Smart woman, your therapist. Leah raised her glass in a toast. To boundaries and healing. I clinked my glass against hers. To truth and new beginnings. Over the next few weeks, I maintained a cautious distance from both my parents. My mother would text occasionally. Nothing heavy, just checking in. How was work? Had I tried that new restaurant downtown? Was my car still making that strange noise? Normal mom stuff that we'd never really done before. My father remained silent, which was both a relief and a disappointment. Part of me had hoped the confrontation might have cracked his rigid exterior, allowed some genuine emotion to seep through. But old habits die hard, especially for someone as stubborn as Richard Harper. I threw myself into work, into my friendships, into my pottery class where I was finally creating pieces that didn't immediately collapse. I started dating again. Nothing serious, just coffee or dinner with men I met through dating apps or friends of friends. I was slowly rebuilding my sense of self-worth, my belief that I deserved love and connection. But the past has a way of lingering, even when you're trying to move forward. One night, I dreamed I was a child again, sitting at that oak dinner table, my father's voice echoing, "Your real parents didn't want you." I woke up with tears streaming down my face. The next morning, I called my mother. "I think I need to understand more," I told her. "About what happened back then. About why you both did what you did." "I've been hoping you'd want to know," she said quietly. "There's so much I haven't told you. So much I've been too ashamed to say." We agreed to meet again, this time at a park near my apartment. It was a beautiful September day, the trees just beginning to hint at their autumn colors. We walked along the path that circled a small lake, watching ducks glide across the water. "I was only 22 when I had you," she began. "Your father and I had been married just a year. Neither of us was ready for a child. But it happened. Back then, you just dealt with it. There wasn't the support, the understanding about postpartum depression and anxiety that there is now." She told me about her own upbringing, how her father had been cold, distant, critical, how her mother had been submissive, always deferring to him, how she'd promised herself she'd never be like them, but then found herself repeating those same patterns with her own family. "The first time I said you were adopted, it was like I became my father, using words as weapons. And once I crossed that line, it was so easy to keep going, to use that particular knife because I knew it cut the deepest." She stopped walking, turned to face me. "I never taught you how to be loved properly, Emma. I never knew how myself." There was such raw honesty in her voice that I couldn't help but believe her. Not as an excuse for what she'd done, but as context, as the beginning of understanding. "I'm learning now," she continued, "in therapy, how to recognize those patterns, how to break them. I know it might be too late for us, but I want you to know I'm trying." "It's not too late," I said, surprising myself. "It's going to take time and work and probably more painful conversations. But I don't think it's too late." She smiled then, A real smile that reminded me of the woman in the hospital photo. I hope not. As we continued our walk, I realized something important. The truth, as painful as it had been to uncover, was setting us both free. Free from the lie that had defined our relationship for so long. Free to discover who we might be to each other without that poison between us. Spring turned to summer, and I threw myself into building a life that wasn't defined by my parents' lies. I started seeing my therapist twice a week, working through the complex emotions that the DNA test and subsequent confrontations had unleashed. I joined a support group for adults who had experienced childhood emotional abuse. I took a pottery class, something I'd always wanted to try but had been too afraid of failing at. My mother called every Sunday. Sometimes I answered, sometimes I didn't. When we did talk, our conversations were stilted but civil. She told me she'd started seeing a therapist of her own. My father never called. In July, I received a promotion at work, a project lead position that would allow me to use my data analysis skills to improve patient care across the hospital system. I celebrated by inviting friends over for dinner, something the old Emma would never have done. The old Emma wouldn't have believed she deserved celebration. One warm August evening, as I was walking home from the farmer's market with a bag full of fresh vegetables, my phone rang. It was my father. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Hello?" I said cautiously. "Emma." His voice sounded different, less gruff, almost uncertain. "How are you?" "I'm fine," I replied, stopping to sit on a park bench. "Why are you calling?" There was a long pause. "Your mother's been on my case about talking to you. About what happened." Of course. He wasn't calling because he wanted to. He was calling because she made him. And I've been thinking about what you said. About us getting help. Another pause. I started seeing someone. A counselor. I nearly dropped my phone. Richard Harper, seeing a therapist. The man who thought psychology was liberal hogwash. "That's good," I managed to say. "Yeah, well, it's not easy talking about all this stuff, but the guy's making some sense. Made me see some things differently." "Like what?" I was still skeptical, but also curious. He sighed heavily. "Like how what we did to you wasn't just some parenting tactic. It was—" He called it emotional abuse. I could hear how difficult it was for him to say those words. "And he's helping me understand why we did it. Not as an excuse, but to make sure I don't repeat those patterns." "I appreciate that," I said, meaning it. "Look, I'm not good at this stuff. Apologies and all that. But I am sorry, Emma. We had no right to treat you that way. You deserved better parents than what you got." I felt tears spring to my eyes. It wasn't a perfect apology, but coming from my father, it was monumental. "Thank you for saying that," I whispered. "Your mother tells me you're doing well. Got a promotion and all." "Yeah, I did." "That's good. Real good." He cleared his throat. "Listen, your mother and I, we were wondering if you might want to come for dinner sometime. When you're ready. No pressure." I thought about it. Was I ready to step back into that house, to sit at that dinner table where so many painful memories had been created? "I don't know if I'm ready for that yet," I said honestly. "Fair enough. The invitation's open. Whenever." After we hung up, I sat on that bench for a long time, watching as the evening light filtered through the trees, casting long shadows across the park. I thought about the journey I'd been on since discovering the truth about my birth. The DNA test had given me more than just biological facts. It had given me the courage to confront the lies that had shaped my life, to stand up for the truth, and to demand better, from my parents and for myself. I called my friend Leah that night and told her about my father's unexpected phone call. "Do you believe him?" she asked. "I want to," I admitted. "But I'm not sure. He's never been one to admit when he's wrong, let alone seek help for it." "People can change," she said. "Not all of them do, but some do. I guess I'll find out." 2 days later, I received a text from my father, the first text he'd ever sent me. It was a photo of him sitting in what looked like a therapist's office, holding up a book titled Breaking the Cycle, Healing from Childhood Wounds. The caption read, Week 3, Still Here. It was such an un-Richard-like gesture that I almost laughed, but I also felt a lump in my throat. He was really trying. I texted back, Proud of you. His response came quickly, Thanks. Means a lot. Our text exchanges became more frequent after that. Nothing deep or emotional, mostly just checking in, sharing small moments from our days. He sent a photo of a deer in their backyard. I sent one of a particularly successful pottery bowl I'd made. Baby steps. My mother continued our Sunday calls, but they too evolved. She began sharing more about her therapy, about the insights she was gaining into her own behavior. I realized something today, she told me one Sunday in late August. All those years I spent telling you that you were unwanted by your real parents. I was actually talking about myself, about how I felt unwanted by my own parents. I was projecting my pain onto you. That makes sense, I said, thinking about the grandfather I'd barely known, the man who'd rarely spoken to me or acknowledged my presence. I'm so sorry, Emma. For all of it. I know, Mom. I know you are. My therapist warned me about moving too quickly toward forgiveness. It's not about whether they deserve your forgiveness, she explained during one of our sessions. It's about whether you're ready to give it. Forgiveness that comes too soon, before you've fully processed your anger and grief, isn't really forgiveness. It's avoidance. I took her words to heart, allowing myself to feel the full range of emotions about what my parents had done. Some days I was filled with rage, wanting to scream at them for stealing my childhood security. Other days I felt profound sadness for all of us, for the family we could have been if not for their lies. And occasionally I felt glimmers of hope that maybe, just maybe, we could build something new from the ashes of our past relationship. In early September, I agreed to have dinner with them, not at their house, but at a restaurant in the city. Neutral ground again. My father was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table, looking uncomfortable in a button-up shirt that wasn't his usual flannel. My mother arrived a few minutes later, bringing a small wrapped package that she set beside her plate. The conversation was awkward at first, filled with weather talk and comments about the menu. But after our food arrived, my father cleared his throat. I've been working on something in therapy, he said, staring down at his steak. Writing letters? Things I needed to say but couldn't. Would it be okay if I read one to you? I glanced at my mother, who looked as surprised as I felt. Sure, I said. He pulled a folded paper from his pocket, his hands trembling slightly as he opened it. Dear Emma, he began, his voice gruff. I've never been good with words, especially when it comes to feelings. That's not an excuse, just a fact. When you were born, I felt things I didn't know how to handle. Love, fear, responsibility. I was raised to believe that men didn't show weakness, didn't talk about emotions. So I pushed those feelings down and focused on what I knew. Working, providing, being the man of the house. He paused, took a sip of water. When your mother first told you that you were adopted, I went along with it because it seemed to work. You behaved better, stopped challenging us so much. But what I didn't understand then was that we were trading your short-term compliance for your long-term trust and self-worth. We were making you feel unlovable to make our jobs as parents easier. My eyes filled with tears. I'd never heard my father speak like this before. I'm ashamed of what we did, he continued. I'm ashamed that I valued control over connection, discipline over love. I'm trying to understand why I made those choices, why I couldn't be the father you deserved. And I want you to know that none of it was your fault. You were a good kid, a great kid. The problem was always with us, never with you. When he finished reading, he carefully folded the paper and put it back in his pocket. The three of us sat in silence for a moment, the sounds of the restaurant, clinking glasses, murmured conversations, kitchen noises, washing over us. Thank you for sharing that, I finally said. It means a lot to hear you say those things. He nodded, not trusting himself to speak. My mother pushed the small package toward me. We got you something. To mark a new beginning, hopefully. I unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a delicate silver necklace with a small pendant, a DNA double helix. "We thought it was appropriate," she said, "since the test is what finally broke through all the lies." I fastened it around my neck, touching the pendant lightly. "It's perfect." As we left the restaurant, my father hesitated, then awkwardly pulled me into a hug. "I'm proud of you, kid," he murmured. "Always have been, even when I couldn't show it." 2 weeks later, I agreed to dinner at their house. It was awkward and tense at times, but also strangely healing. My mother had redecorated the dining room, new table, new paint, as if trying to physically erase the scene of so many painful memories. My father was quieter than usual, less domineering. They both made an effort. We started a new tradition, monthly family dinners, rotating between their house, my apartment, and restaurants. Sometimes they were stilted, sometimes surprisingly warm. We were learning how to be a family without the lie between us, without the power dynamic it had created. During one of these dinners at my apartment in November, my mother brought a photo album I'd never seen before. "I've been putting this together," she explained, setting it on my coffee table. "All the photos from your childhood, in chronological order, with real stories attached, not the lies we told you." We spent the evening going through it. Baby pictures, first steps, birthdays, school events. She'd written little notes beside many of them, recalling details I'd forgotten or never known. "You were so excited about this dollhouse," she said, pointing to a Christmas photo of 7-year-old me. "You played with it every day for months. Made up these elaborate stories about the family who lived there." "I remember that," I said, smiling at the memory. "The mother doll was a famous artist, and the father was a chef." "That's right. And the little girl was going to be president someday." My father, who had been quietly looking over our shoulders, spoke up. "You used to make me sit on the floor and have tea parties with those dolls." I'd complain, but honestly, those were some of my favorite times. I looked at him in surprise. "Really? You never seemed to enjoy them." "I didn't know how to show it," he admitted. But yeah, I did. These moments of connection, of shared history reclaimed from the lie, were healing something deep inside me. Not erasing the past, but creating a new context for it, a new understanding. As I drove home after that first dinner at their house, I realized that while I might never have the perfect relationship with my parents, I could perhaps have an honest one. And honesty was a foundation we'd never had before. The DNA test sits in my desk drawer now, next to the hospital photo of newborn me with my mother. Sometimes I take them out and look at them, reminders that I wasn't unwanted, that I wasn't abandoned, that I belonged somewhere all along. They're reminders, too, of my own resilience, how I survived years of believing I was fundamentally unlovable, and how I found the strength to discover the truth. During a therapy session in December, I shared how much had changed in the month since the DNA test. "Are you ready to forgive them?" my therapist asked. I thought about it carefully. "I think forgiveness is a process, not a moment," I said. "I'm somewhere in the middle of that process. Some days I feel closer to forgiveness than others." "That's a very healthy perspective," she said. "What I do know is that I'm ready to stop letting their lie define me. I'm ready to write my own story now." That night, I added a new entry to the journal I'd been keeping since the DNA test revelation. I wrote about forgiveness, about healing, about reclaiming my narrative. And I ended with the words that had become something of a mantra for me. "I don't know what the future holds for my relationship with my parents. Healing isn't linear, and trust, once broken, is difficult to rebuild. But I do know this. I am Emma Harper. I am wanted. I am enough. And no lie can ever take that truth away from me again." In the spring, almost a year after the DNA test that changed everything, I was promoted again at work, this time to department director. When I called my parents to share the news, they insisted on taking me out to celebrate. Over dinner, my father raised his glass in a toast. "To Emma," he said, his voice steady, his eyes meeting mine. "The strongest, smartest Harper there ever was." My mother added, "And the most forgiving." I clinked my glass against theirs, feeling something settle within me. Not perfect wholeness, I doubted that would ever come, but something like peace. The truth had set us all free, in different ways. Free to fail, free to try again, free to be imperfect together. And in that moment, that was enough.